It's a pleasure to have for today's speaker, Dr. Rhonda Trust. She's a visiting assistant professor of communication here at Boston University's College of Communication in the Department of Mass Communication, Advertising, and Public Relations. Dr. Trust is interested in how the media influences health behaviors. Her research focuses on the media's representation of reproductive health issues, ranging from sexual disease prevention to birth and infant feeding. Her future publications are based on her dissertation, Social Influences on Breastfeeding Behaviors, Examining Media, Interpersonal, Social, and Interpersonal Variables. While much of Dr. Trust's interdisciplinary social scientific research is quantitative, she has conducted both qualitative and quantitative research as a research assistant at the Centers for Disease Control's Center of Excellence for Health Communication and Marketing at the University of Connecticut. Her topic for today is very interesting. It's titled The Dual Role of Press in the Media and Health Communication Perspective. It's my pleasure to introduce our February colloquium speaker, Dr. Rhonda Trust.
Thank you and welcome today. Before I really get into the meat of my discussion, I just want to give you a preview about what I will talk about today, just kind of keep it organized. So first I'll discuss how breastfeeding is actually a public health issue that we all should be concerned about as people, human beings living in this country. Then I'll talk about breast in the media, and I'll define media for you as I will discuss today, because we know media is a very large definition. Then I'll discuss the sexualized breast in the media, and I have a lot of visual images for this presentation, as you can imagine. And so we'll see some visual images and some clips as well, media clips. Then give examples of what I think as a researcher and actually a medical counselor in this specific field, what are negative and positive images of breastfeeding in the media. I'll also talk about celebrities. That's where my current research really lies, celebrities in the media and their discussions about breastfeeding, or being spokeswomen for breastfeeding or spokesmen. And then segue into my research, my past research, present, and future research I'd like to do, future campaigns I'd like to see in the field. So, just to start off, public health. Just to ask you some questions. When do you think good health starts in your life? When do you think optimal health begins? You can answer. But essentially, as you're growing in utero, definitely what your mom, what the carrier of you is giving you for nourishment. And then
with your mother's health.
Okay, so right, the initial, like after you're born, right?
Before the baby is born.
Right, before the baby's born, so in utero you're receiving nourishment, so definitely. And then when you're born, your gut, your internal system, and I'm not going to get too medical. I am a certified lactation counselor, so I have a lot of medical training in this field, but I won't get too medical on you today. But something happens to your body when you're born. You have a very sensitive gut. Your insides are really open and they're sensitive, and pathogens and allergens can get in. So the first food that kind of coats the stomach and produces a very thick layer of protection, like a thick coating of paint, is colostrum, or it's pre-breast milk, it's colostrum, and that is really what women produce the first couple of days of birth, and that really can set the tone for your health as a human for the rest of your life. It can really set up what's going to happen in your gut and your system for the rest of your life, potentially. So according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, and even the Surgeon General, breastfeeding should be a very big concern in our country. I'm going to focus a lot on nationally, not internationally. The Surgeon General has recently issued a call for action for hospitals to become baby-friendly, which essentially, there's a lot to baby-friendly, but essentially promotes breastfeeding. So a lot has been done at the government level, and all these health organizations strongly suggest that babies are exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of life to ensure health benefits. And I'm going to talk about health benefits today. And I want you to think about these health benefits in terms of the dose and the duration of getting breast milk. So benefits for baby are endless if they receive breast milk. Does anybody know, like off the top of their head, what kind of benefit a child receives? Right, their immune system, because breast milk is a living substance, it contains white blood cells. If you actually looked at it under a microscope, it's a living substance. So it's like a vaccine, essentially. What else? So better immune system, therefore less diarrhea, ear infections, pneumonia, bronchitis, asthma. Studies have been shown autism, diabetes, type 1, type 2 diabetes. Studies have shown brain development is different in children who are breastfed. There's a recent study that just came out talking about children who are breastfed and their success in college. There's children who weren't. And you can see that some of these results could potentially be controversial, right? I mean, if you weren't the breastfed baby, does that mean that you're not going to have a high IQ or you're not going to be a healthy person? So you can see how these findings can be somewhat controversial, but still, there's been so much research done supporting these findings. Of course, it depends on the duration, how long the child was breastfed, and if they were exclusively breastfed until they start eating solids. So the benefits for baby go on and on and on and on. Children who are breastfed are usually less obese, although there's a recent New England Journal of Medicine article that kind of negated that, but there's the history to why they negated it. But generally speaking, what about benefits for mom? Anyone have any idea? Reduced risk of breast and ovarian cancer, even diabetes, and also faster postpartum weight loss. And if you think about it from a biological perspective, it makes sense what the body's supposed to do, what it does, what it doesn't do after birth. Benefits for society. How could this benefit society as a whole?
Reduce costs.
Definitely reduce costs. So a sick baby that is constantly sick with ear infections, bronchitis, or even has to be hospitalized. A parent or caregiver has to take off work to treat that sick baby. Someone has to pay for the treatments the sick baby receives. If the baby's on formula, sometimes they go on prescription formula, which can cost up to $2,000 a month that insurance companies pay for. So the expense is incredible. Bartik and Reinhold conducted a study. Bartik, I actually spoke to her today. She's a colleague friend, a doctor and president of the Massachusetts Breastfeeding Coalition. She did a study with Reinhold from Harvard, an economist, looking at the cost, the burden of suboptimal breastfeeding in the United States, what it's costing you, taxpayers, me, all of us, $13 billion a year annually. So that's a lot of money. A lot of that, less than half actually, medical costs, treating these sick kids. All their costs include the time you have to take off from work. In their study, they did this twice. The recent one, as of 2005, where their data was from, 2007, published in 2010. If 90% of families exclusively breastfed for 6 months, 900 babies would be saved a year. Infant mortality rate goes down, breastfeeding goes up, and $13 billion a year in economic costs would be saved in our country. That's a lot of money. So it is a public health issue. United States as a whole, are we a healthy nation? Are we a model nation for industrialized nations? We have, no. We have high rates of cancer, we have high rates of diabetes, stroke, heart attack. Other countries where breastfeeding is the norm, unless there's some kind of circumstance where the mother can't, they have lower rates of these diseases. So there is an association between breastfeeding as the norm in a culture and the health of that culture. So these are things just to keep in your mind throughout the talk. So, how I became interested, I always wondered media and what kind of responsibility they have and don't have to portray health messages accurately to the public. Media's done a good or a bad job displaying or portraying other health issues such as smoking, anti-smoking campaigns, safe sex, and obesity. But for my talk, I'm talking a lot about pop culture media. I'm going to show a lot of examples from popular culture magazines, TV shows. I wasn't going to show any film, but there is a film that I am going to show you with a recent comical film with an example of breastfeeding. Researchers and the American Academy of Pediatrics all say that media should portray breastfeeding as normal and positive, since bottle feeding is the norm in most media. Very little research about this topic has been conducted in this country, and that's when I started this research a decade ago, what really got me fired up. Why isn't this in research? UK, Australia, Canada, there has been research done on this topic, but very little in the US, and rarely any in the comm field. There have been a couple content analyses, but nothing large. It's not a large area of research. So, moving on. I want you to look at this picture. What are some thoughts that come to mind when you see this cuddly polar bear?
Normal.
Normal, okay. Anyone else? Natural. Peaceful. Is anyone grossed out, or does anyone feel uncomfortable by the mama bear nursing the cubs? What about this image? First things that come to mind. Maternal? Seems like an invasion of her privacy. Okay. Anyone else? No? Is anyone uncomfortable, or probably not if you chose to come to the talk, right?
Why is she wearing sunglasses?
Maybe she's at the beach or at a pool, perhaps a pool. But that's a good question, and I don't know if that's Angelina Jolie or one of the Octomom who tried to look like Angelina Jolie. I couldn't quite establish who that was, but anyways. So what the question I'm going to ask next is, we're so used to seeing breasts in the media sexualized to sell products, to grab attention. Can we as Americans handle seeing breasts for both sexual reasons or marketing reasons and for feeding reasons? What is the actual biological role of breasts? Kind of going back to this picture, humans are mammals, right? I know that we don't like to think of ourselves in the animal kingdom, but we are mammals. Women, men too, right, have mammary glands. I don't know the degree of the glands in men, but female mammals have mammary glands. So biologically, breasts are for feeding. Whether you choose to have children or not, or breastfeed or not, that's fine, but biologically, that's why we have them. That's why female humans have them. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Sophia. So we're okay with this image, right? Would anybody feel a little bit awkward if there was a baby attached to her nursing? And I haven't seen Modern Family recently. I know she had a baby in the show. Does it show her nursing? So I wonder if there was an image like this. So just keep this in mind, that this is kind of normal. We wouldn't look twice. Well, maybe you'd look twice. You wouldn't look 3 times, right? You wouldn't look 3 times. 3 times. But if her baby was nursing, this might make some people feel a little uncomfortable or shocked, or, as you said, an invasion. We might not know how to feel because it's not an image we're used to seeing. You don't usually get on the T and see a woman nursing with her breast out or in a Starbucks. Okay, this is a recent picture. Does anybody know who this is? A student just sent this to me. He said, Dr. Trust, you have to use this for your presentation. And I don't think he's here. So,
Yeah.
it's Kate Upton. Exactly.
That's
That's a new Sports Illustrated issue, and apparently the beads, I guess it was in honor of Mardi Gras, are painted on. So this is a painted on bathing suit. Again, this is acceptable to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated, right? So I want you to just keep that in mind, the cover of Sports Illustrated. There's a lot of breast there. It's not really concealed. Probably much less would be showing if in the picture of the mom nursing, right? Than we see of Kate Upton. Okay. Anybody recognize this little gem? This little Southern Belle? Miley Cyrus. I don't know how old she is now, but I think she's probably 17 or 18 in this picture. Very often we see very young girls or young women selling products with their chest. And we're okay with this as a culture, generally speaking. You don't see Facebook groups create, well, maybe you would, but you don't see such a backlash as you would in the next, in the few slides I'll show you. So another example of breast, is this commercial selling a bra? This advertisement selling a bra? Absolutely not. They're actually selling cars. Like ulcertrader.com. If you're going to find a car, you must remember the white bra and breasts. Because you'll need that. You need them. You'll need to know what breasts and a white bra look like to buy a car. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate the sexualization of breasts, this is probably more legitimate because it's actually an ad for bras, for Wonder Bra, so I guess they would need to show that. Perhaps there could be more explanation of how the bra is wonderful, rather than just maybe more text. Is it comfortable?
There's no self-evident.
There's no explanation. Right, exactly. And then finally, the Chanel ad with the woman topless in suspenders. So much of her breast is exposed. A really large amount of this breast is exposed. When we do see breastfeeding images in the media, magazine covers, there's not that much breast actually showing. First of all, the nipple's not showing because the baby is on. The baby's body is usually covering most of the breast, and a shirt or scarf or something's usually there. So there's actually much less breast skin shown when a baby's nursing than we see daily in advertising. Okay. So think about these images. Normal, okay, if you were flipping through a magazine and saw a commercial for a bra or underwear or makeup, or would you be okay with these ads? These ads actually have younger babies. So in this country, people tend to be a little bit more comfortable if they see a baby nursing if the baby's young. But when we start to see older babies or young toddlers or even older toddlers nursing, people get uncomfortable. They feel if the baby's talking or walking or looking more human-like, adult-like, then they're not okay with that. The United States is one of the very few industrialized nations that doesn't have, where toddler weaning is the norm. So for example, Mongolia, for example. Mongolia, do you know what they're famous for producing?
Breastfed babies.
Sumo wrestlers, right? Sumo wrestlers. The average age of weaning in Mongolia is 6 years old. Adult humans sometimes will often drink breast milk for if they see it in the fridge or something. They really value and appreciate the nutritive qualities of breast milk. In some countries, it's even used to cure cancer, or to treat cancer patients, not to cure cancer. So Scandinavian countries, extended nursing is the norm. Other cultures in Africa and South America is the norm. So, but again, a lot of people may feel uncomfortable with this image. This image. So you may know the Time magazine cover from last May. The article itself wasn't entirely about breastfeeding. In fact, the article itself was about attachment parenting. Dr. Sears, a great pediatrician in Southern California, he has several children, a couple of pediatricians with him in his practice, kind of like renovated attachment parenting. Attachment parenting essentially is what mammals do with other mammals than humans do with their young. For example, if the baby's crying, they attend to it. The baby's hungry, they feed it. Attachment parenting basically is not like the 1950s ways of parenting where you ignore the crying baby, they're on a very rigid schedule. And part of the core of attachment parenting is breastfeeding, and extended breastfeeding, child-led weaning. So this article was actually about attachment parenting, wasn't about breastfeeding. However, the cover, communicates something very differently. This woman, Jamie, is still nursing. He's now 4. He was 3 in the picture. And I just want to sidebar. He's actually a very big 3-year-old. Okay, some 3-year-olds are very, very small. He was actually an off the charts large 3-year-old. So he looked older, and he was standing on a chair, so he's close to her height, or at least her chest level. So this cover, a lot of people after this cover came out asking what I thought of it. From a marketing standpoint, I think it definitely caught people's attention. People were probably more likely to grab the magazine and read the article, which is good if you want to educate people about attachment parenting. However, people who were already feeling negative, and this is all based on anecdotal information, not any empirical research, but people who are anti-breastfeeding to begin with became even more anti-breastfeeding, and even people who were on the fence and just anecdotal reports tended to err on the side of not being favorable towards breastfeeding because it was giving it a bad name, as one person said. So I want you to just take into consideration this cover. This is the same mom and baby duo, but perhaps this is a more like normal nursing position for someone who's still nursing a toddler. Typically, toddlers are consistently nursing. They're nursing like for prior to bedtime or if they're uncomfortable. So this is probably more of a realistic image, but this probably wouldn't have sold so many Time magazines as this image, right? She actually went on to be on the cover of a natural parenting magazine called Pathways. This is a much more acceptable image for the mainstream America, right? If we saw this instead of the original Time magazine cover, we might be okay with this. She's nursing the same child. He just looks a lot younger, right? Without his shirt on, laying down. That's her adoptive son and her husband. Okay. In other countries, again, it's the norm. They wonder why uptight Americans can't handle breastfeeding. They wonder why American men are obsessed with breasts as sexual objects, and they think we're crazy. These are some quotes from qualitative research I've read about and included in my lit review over the years. This is from a Norwegian magazine with the cover. This was from 1998 New Yorker. So there have been other magazines with breastfeeding on the cover. This is probably, I guess, easier to handle for Americans than the older toddler standing and the mom looking a little bit seductive standing there. Okay? This is from the New Yorker in 1998. So, before I segue into some examples, I just wanted to reiterate that these images of breasts as sexual objects are almost impossible to ignore in society. I'm sure you can think of many images in the magazines that you may read, or even billboards that you pass by. They're everywhere. So the question to you is, why is it uncomfortable for Americans, our culture, to see a baby nursing, to see the breast actually being used what they're biologically meant to use?
I was just going to say, with the Time magazine cover, as well as the cover you had following that, I think that at least part of it may not have just been an image, but the actual text where it says, are you mom enough? Because that definitely feels very judgmental.
Exactly.
For women who may not be able to breastfeed biologically, or due to other sort of requirements, maybe they can't breastfeed because of their work schedule, they have to work, or other factors.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that. You're gonna say that because you're actually stealing my thunder for my conclusion. Because when you see the conclusion, you'll see.
I think there's something else. The only image is, first of all, is it a widespread group of people who are affected by this, or is it just a small?
By this image?
No, by public breastfeeding or breastfeeding, there's just a small, extreme group who happens to be
vocal. From the research I've collected and from the advocacy groups, I was the advocacy chair for the state of Connecticut. From what I've been exposed to in that and from my data, yes, I think a lot of people generally speaking, majority, are not comfortable compared to other cultures.
When you hear about that person on the airplane complaining to the city next to someone, you think that they're free to have a woman.
Airplanes, Starbucks, malls, that's why federal legislation has been put in place. Massachusetts has one of the best laws in the country. Missouri actually just passed a law last week that they no longer can arrest women or fine women for nursing in public, as ludicrous as it is. In Massachusetts and Connecticut, if a store owner tells you to leave, they'll be fined. There's also a lot of federal legislation. The Obama campaign is they're very big endorsers of public breastfeeding and breastfeeding in the workplace. So Michelle Obama has done a lot with her administration.
By the way, the reason this image is provocative is maybe less to do with the headline, more to do with the woman is looking at you, the reader, as opposed to the child, almost like a defiant kind of way. And almost
Right,
any of the
as
images
opposed to-
with
right,
the person,
right.
when the person's looking at a child, I don't think it feels like it's an intimate moment between a mom and a child. When she's staring at you, then she's inviting you in a weird way. But that's obviously intentional.
Right. Right.
Old woman doing it here. What is
Right.
this, and it's just like, I think part of it is like we're really sensitized to like this.
Expecting breast only to look a certain way.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's why I know Americans, and I didn't include this in it, but we spend a lot of money, for about billions a year, on breast augmentation. So a lot. In my practice, I've actually worked with women who are now trying to breastfeed after having breast implants and realizing some challenges they may have. So it's just been interesting to see that shift. Okay, so moving on to television and film examples. So if media, and I'm going to kind of focus on sitcoms and some dramas, if breastfeeding is portrayed, it's usually either in a category as gross or sexual, and very rarely is it actually informative or educational. There have been a couple shows, which I'll mention in a minute, that do show it in a very subtle way, in a normative way, but they're definitely in the minority. So this is a Friends episode from a number of years ago.
Hey, are you ready to try nursing again?
I am. Hey, why do you think she won't take my breast?
It's all right, honey. Take some babies a while to get it. Don't worry, it'll happen. Yowza.
Hey, sweetie, you can do it. Just open up and put it in your mouth.
What?
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, look, I think that...
Oh, but look, she's pulling away again. Do you think my nipples are too big for her mouth? She looks scared. Doesn't she look scared?
You know, I don't really know her.
Why don't we try massaging the breast to stimulate the flow?
Are you kidding me?
Frustrating. Why doesn't she want my breast?
I don't know, maybe she's crazy.
Okay, so that was just an example of how that whole theme, which was somewhat educational, because the nurse was giving to Rachel, accurate information, but Joey was just thinking in terms of sex and really couldn't handle what the nurse was saying. So it was just a comical scene. I wouldn't deem it as very educational for most viewers. The next clip I want to share is from the movie The Hangover. We just have to switch to the video player. So it would switch. Okay, there we go. Okay.
I haven't seen her since the wedding.
Wedding, okay.
And, what time was that at?
Well, it was, this was around 1. I had to go back to work and finish my shift. And then I got out and handed over to them, so
Was Doug here then?
I didn't see Dad. You guys were passed out. The room was a wreck. So I just filled that next to Steve. I kind of cold.
I have a question. You said your shift ended. Does that mean you're a nurse? Or a blackjack dealer?
You know this. I'm a stripper. Well, technically I'm an escort, but stripping's a great way to meet the clients.
Smart. Savvy.
That's all in the past. Now that I'm married to the doctor.
Okay, so basically, my point of showing that scene, well, actually, let me ask you, how would you perceive that scene? Sexualized, definitely. At first, they were completely shocked when she started nursing. As they continued the conversation, I think they got over it, except for one of the characters who was kind of hypnotized. But again, if we do see breastfeeding scenes, they're usually sexualized or they're made fun of because something gross happening in the body. In the 70s, Sesame Street, actually, and I wish Michael Lohman was here to talk about this. But Sesame Street in the 70s and then again in the 80s did have breastfeeding in their show. In the 70s, they had a character, Buffy, nursing her baby, and Big Bird was really curious. Now remember who Sesame's targeted to, right? So the point of Sesame doing this, if you start introducing breastfeeding as a norm to young children, then by the time they're adults, they will consider it the normal way to feed a child, and it won't be as stigmatized. So I'm not going to show you the Buffy clip, but I am going to show you the clip from the 80s of Maria explaining to an child.
You're feeding Gabriella, right?
Yeah, she's drinking milk from my breast.
Is that the only way you can feed her?
Oh no, sometimes I feed her this way and sometimes I feed her with a bottle.
Oh.
But I like this way the best. It's natural, it's good for her. I got a chance to hug her some more.
When is she gonna eat real food?
Oh, pretty soon. I'm gonna give her some cereal, then I'm gonna give her mashed up bits of fruit and vegetables, and then mashed up bits of chicken. Before you know it, she won't be a baby anymore. She'll be eating great big fat sandwiches. But for now, this is nice. She's drinking milk.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes.
Okay. So the 90s and now, the 2000s and currently this decade, Sesame is not, they don't have another breastfeeding scene. There's been lots of requests, but it's not there. So will it be there in the future? We don't know. Lactivists or breastfeeding activists are really trying to push Sesame to have some kind of curriculum, as well as Michelle Obama's campaign, the obesity campaign, the Let's Move campaign. One of the 5 platforms for reducing child obesity is breastfeeding. So they're trying to implement scripts in Sesame that will kind of mimic what they did in the 70s and 80s. The last media clip I want to leave you with is a recent Love's commercial that has been very breastfeeding positive, but I still think it's a bit sexualized. So I want you to comment.
First kid?
It's here, but it's not projecting. Okay.
Okay, up here.
I don't know why it's not.
Second kid. By their second kid, every mom is an expert and more likely to choose love. She's already ordered. So. loves.
Sorry about that. It's not there, yeah. Yeah, I'll just describe the scene because it's not, unless I X out of my PowerPoint, it won't let me show it. But basically, it's the mom. The first scene is the mom breastfeeding her first child in the corner of the restaurant, hidden by a towel, really looking uncomfortable. The second scene, she now has her second child back at the same restaurant, nursing right at the table. The waiter's looking at her. She's telling the waiter, nope, she's already ordered. Let's order. Like, I want to order. And the son gives the waiter a dirty look. It's actually a Love the Diaper commercial, but it's a very positive breastfeeding commercial, according to breastfeeding advocates, because it's showing breastfeeding as the norm. Like a woman should be able to nurse her child at the table if the child's hungry. People eat at the table. So if perhaps after the presentation when I X out of the PowerPoint, it will let me show you. I have it up on here, it's just not letting me. Okay. So other shows that have portrayed breastfeeding, Friday Night Lights, and they've done a good job of doing it subtly in the show. The Office, The New Normal, I think last week or two had an episode about breastfeeding and mothers resisting to, a restaurant owner told them to leave and there was some kind of protest. I didn't see it myself, but I read about it. Grey's Anatomy and Private Practice, Shonda Rhimes, the writer, director, producer, all of the above, does a really good job of subtly putting breastfeeding educational messages in her script. She often shows, like, for example, if the baby's in the NICU, she'll show breast pumps in the background or discuss how the baby's getting breast milk. In Private Practice, one woman adopted a baby, and it showed her going to the breast milk bank to get human milk to feed the baby. She wanted to feed the baby species-specific milk, human milk instead of artificial milk or cow's milk. So it was really interesting, and she's often done that. Shonda Rhimes has often done that with these shows. And Days of Our Lives, as crazy as it sounds, Days of Our Lives is a soap opera. The writers of the soap opera have put in scripts that have been educational breastfeeding messages. As dramatic as they are, for example, one woman, her baby had to be hidden at the nunnery, so it shows her calling, the nunnery, the abbey, telling them that she's sending pumped breast milk. It's okay to give formula until her breast milk gets there, but her breast milk's on the way. I mean, this was part of a soap opera. So, I am starting to observe that there are some subtle, and, they're not the point of the episode or the point of the script, but they're subtly putting educational components about the benefits of breast milk or breastfeeding as the norm in the scripts. Okay, so celebrities in breastfeeding, I'm going to go a little bit quicker over this because I want to get to my research. Celebrities in breastfeeding, well, anything a celebrity does is kind of, they become the spokesperson for it. Angelina Jolie was the cover of W Magazine 2008. This cover received lots of controversial comments. You can't even see much of her breast. There's a little baby's hand there. She was nursing one of her twins. Brad Pitt took photos of their life at home, and the photos were in the magazine, and this was one of the photos. People really reacted negatively to this photo. You don't even see much breast. You barely see the baby's hand. Other celebrities that have spoken out, Kelly Preston, the Kardashians, Maya Bialik. And we know that if celebrities bring attention to a health topic, it's good. Katie Couric did a lot for encouraging people to get colonoscopies, right? So we know celebrity spokespeople of health, when they're talking about health and they're being a spokesperson for that health issue, it can be positive. Celine Dion, Salma Hayek. Salma Hayek was nursing her own child at the time, went to Sierra Leone and Africa, and there were a lot of babies that were orphans. She was nursing babies there, and that brought a lot of attention to her in breastfeeding and human milk and so forth. Pink is an advocate for breastfeeding. Her husband took this. She was nursing her 18-month-old, and then he tweeted it. They were at a cafe in France. Go ahead, ask him to cover up or leave, I dare you. Now, one of the biggest celebrities, Tom Brady's wife, Gisele Bundchen, she's a former model. So she's probably someone who's very comfortable with her body and her breasts. She's a very loud, outspoken breastfeeding activist. She was interviewed in a magazine and on television, and she believes that, in her opinion, mothers should breastfeed for at least 6 months. She also believes, she stated in one interview that breastfeeding should be made the law. She received a lot of negative comments, but she was seeing it from, again, a public health perspective, that women should breastfeed or they should be fined for making our country sick. So really interesting. She's also a member of Best for Babes. They're a nonprofit organization who sets out to get rid of booby traps in the media. So all of these images, all of the media images of breastfeeding led me to research that I initially conducted 6 years ago, which led me to my most recent research. 6 years ago, I was interested in looking at baby shows, Bringing Home Baby, Baby Story, shows that are on the TV station TLC. And I was interested in the images of breastfeeding and formula feeding in these shows, and I wondered if it actually would influence people or influence their attitudes, not their behavior, but I was just measuring attitudes. So I conducted an experiment. I had, at the University of Connecticut, COM undergrads have to do experiments for extra credits for their large lecture class. So I had several 18 and 19-year-olds watch a show they probably weren't interested in, Baby Story or Bringing Home Baby. Their shows about the baby coming home the first 24 hours. You know, these shows are more geared for people in their childbearing years, which technically 18 and 19, but socially more like late 20s and 30s. So from the experiment, I found that the reverse of what I was looking for, the people who watched the episodes with formula feeding had stronger attitudes, positive attitudes towards breastfeeding than those who actually watched the breastfeeding scenes. Kind of makes sense. Maybe those who watched the breastfeeding scenes were grossed out by them. Maybe people who watched the formula feeding scenes thought breastfeeding should have been there because it's healthier. I found, of course, gender, females have stronger attitudes. And I found an interesting thing that media that was very pro-formula was positively associated with their attitudes. And I looked at this with my advisor, and we looked at the ads, a lot of the popular ads at that time. And at the beginning of the formula commercials, they always say, breast milk is best for babies. And then that kind of fades away, and then they introduce their formula product. So maybe people were getting that initial message, we're not sure. Kind of a quirky finding. So I kind of ground my dissertation research. I looked at I used social cognitive theory, DOI, diffusion of innovations, and theory of planned behavior. It's kind of a combination of these salient outcome theories to guide me with the variables of interest. And for my dissertation, I wanted to look at more than just media. So I looked at other factors like social support, family support, your medical practitioner support, your workplace support, because many women work and have children. And also women's self-esteem, and their media influence, media consumption. If they notice celebrities mentioning their celebrity comments or endorses of breastfeeding. So this was the model that I used for my dissertation. There are a lot of variables here. Just for the sake of this talk, just the media and breastfeeding examples, variables, what I'm really talking about today. And I was really interested in their attitudes and their norms, their injunctive and scripting norms surrounding breastfeeding. And then the ultimate behavior of interest, I was wondering if they breastfed, and if they did, how long and how exclusively they breastfed. So that was my ultimate dependent variable. And just for the sake of, again, this talk, media, I broke it into print media initially, TV media, and celebrity media. But that ultimately changed after I did something called a factor analysis. So again, my first hypothesis, I was wondering if women's behaviors are influenced by exposure to certain kinds of media. And second hypothesis dealt with the celebrity influence. If women actually noticed the comments celebrities were making and paid attention to them, and could the celebrity comments explain some of their behavior? Because we know media can't explain 100% of someone's behavior, right? But if it can explain a quarter of someone's behavior, that's pretty good. Pretty good effect size. And we know that it can. My sample consisted of, well, initially 600 women were recruited from online baby websites. So this was an electronic survey. Babysitter.com, parenting.com, a lot of these websites pregnant women or women who have children go on. gain more information. 500 actually completed the survey, and the criteria they had to have at least one child, be over 18, and living in the US. Now, my sample was very homogeneous, and it's good because I know something about a very specific sample of women, but I really wanted I wanted more variety in my sample and more diverse sample, and I didn't get that. So I'm only generalizing these results to a very specific group of women. These women were white, highly educated, employed, married. Many of them with graduate degrees reported that they were lawyers, judges, veterinarians, doctors, professors, so a very educated sample. High income earning, about 50% earned over $70,000, and predominantly, 54% from the Northeast. And this was an online survey, so it was available to everyone, every woman essentially in the country on these websites. So just pay attention for this talk, just pay attention. So my results were really interesting. I found that, again, negative portrayals of breastfeeding were positively associated with the duration, the length that women breastfed. So it was really quirky. We're trying to figure out why. Are these women so educated and so committed to breastfeeding that despite the negative images they see in the media, they're still going to breastfeed for a long time? And the media examples aren't salient to them? When I split the data, so I looked at the data all together, then I split it. I looked at specifically working women, and working women were celebrities, working women breastfeeding duration, let's say was influenced, because there's a correlation between celebrity comments and the duration of working women's breastfeeding habits, behaviors. So really interesting. After doing some more research and discussion with my advisor, we thought it could be because celebrity moms are working moms. They are working moms, so perhaps these working moms may pay more attention to what other working moms, aka celebrities, are doing and how they're managing pumping and working or breastfeeding while they're touring for their concerts. So it's really interesting, which really inspires me to do further research on the effect of celebrity spokeswomen or spokesmen and the comments that celebrities make, positive or negative, to see if there is an association between people's breastfeeding attitudes and ultimately their behaviors. My theory supported high data, and I'm going to skip that because I talked about the other variables too. But I do think future research should continue to look at online social media, Facebook, Twitter, and actually not just Facebook and Twitter, but after articles are posted on online magazines and newspapers, the comments are so passionate, negatively and positively. The comments are horrendous and sometimes even evil. People get very heated, very fired up about this. There's Facebook pages, several of them, dedicated to this breastfeeding war. And it's crazy how fired up people get. I shouldn't say it's crazy, but as a media researcher, it's crazy to me, and it's worthy of a lot of investigation. I definitely want to conduct a content analysis, and I want to look at all kinds of shows and film. There hasn't been anything empirically done about films. I've seen one thing that was in a non-mainstream magazine. I definitely want to enhance the survey, make it available to women of all socioeconomic levels, going to, for example, WIC offices and having the kiosks with surveys in WIC offices to obtain different demographics information. And just to end, I know you were kind of hinting at, like, are you mom enough? This just recently came out. Are we supporting moms enough? Because ultimately that's what it is. If a woman is working at McDonald's and she wants to stay committed to breastfeeding, is she going to be able to ask her boss, for pumping breaks, which she's allowed by law? Does she have examples in the media of other moms working that are asking their bosses? Does she have a script to emulate that she sees in the media? So are we supporting our moms enough is really, where we should look at. When we see magazine covers like this, that's what we should think about. What are we doing enough to support moms and ultimately to enhance the health of our country? Are there any questions? Yes, Ryan?
breastfeeding as an acceptance in our society? Would you say that that's part of the umbrella of the war on women right now?
Potentially. Potentially. And the war on women can also include other women.
Yeah.
I have read pieces that of women attacking women for wanting to be breastfeeding and working moms and so forth. So potentially. Definitely.
Oh, you can let him go.
In your research, did you ask any people who were opposed to breastfeeding as to why?
So I did have, at the end, the survey was very lengthy. There were over 100 questions because I had so many variables. But there were some places for open-ended questions and people to leave comments. One of the questions was, you know, if you didn't breastfeed, why? And a lot of the responses were lack of support from either the medical practitioners or family members. Oh, my mother-in-law told me not to do it. Or, you know, my mother said I shouldn't do it, or the doctor said that the baby would be very unhealthy because they were low birth weight. So a lot of negative verbal responses.
But the only people who gave those responses were women, correct?
Yes, the online survey. I have like anecdotal information, you know, from working with women for several years, but I haven't done interviews. I actually would like to do interviews. It would take a while, but to ask women who didn't breastfeed why, and of all generations, like women beyond their childbearing years and young women, you know, in terms of their behavior, their intention for behavior.
I'd just be interested for answers from men, and then their answers why, and then those people were also breastfed when they were.
Right, and I did ask that with my initial study that I did with you at UConn with the undergrads. That was one of the first questions I asked if they were breastfed, and it was like a large, I think it was like 70% said that they were breastfed. But looking back at the data, the national health data, that didn't correlate with breastfeeding rates in the 80s, which were quite low. So we're wondering if they just put that to put that, or maybe they thought they were breastfed for a week. I mean, we didn't ask the length. With the most recent research I did for my dissertation, I asked that question. I asked how, if you were breastfed, do you recall how long? And many of the women who reported they were breastfed over 12 months also breastfed their own child over 12 months, so I thought that was interesting. The cover of Time magazine, the mom, Jamie, was actually breastfed until she was 5 or 6, I read. So might be some interesting correlation there. Yeah.
I had a couple of questions related to media, traditional media versus new social alternative emerging. The first question is, you mentioned that you looked at, I think I got this right, print and broadcast and then celebrity media?
Well, my lit review, the literature I've read over the decades has been all over.
What is celebrity media?
Celebrity
How
comments in the media. So a celebrity talking about breastfeeding or interviewed in W magazine or People magazine about her challenges as a new mom and she's breastfeeding. Or celebrities on TV, like for example, Celine Dion was one of the nightly news shows followed her around backstage in Vegas, and it showed her stopping to feed her babies or stopping to sing songs to pump. So like some were very obvious comments, like Gisele Bundchen is a very outspoken person about breastfeeding, and others just happened to mention it, like in her reality show, Kardashian, I forgot Kim, Courtney, which she has 2 children, right? And when she had her first child, she kept talking about how she didn't want to give formula, and she was very committed to breastfeeding, but the show wasn't about breastfeeding. So a combination of print, news interviews,
But celebrity media is part of print broadcast, which is a celebrity spokesperson or a celebrity person. The second question is, would you talk a little bit more about, this is really an interesting presentation. My sister nursed her kid till she was 3 and a half. All I'm saying is the kid's brilliant. That's all I'm saying. But when we think about it, would you talk a little bit, because you did at the end, you used a lot of examples from traditional media. Would you talk about how new media or social media, alternative emerging, how you anticipate they'll influence your research from this point? How are new media going to change things?
well, they make, I believe, and Edward said this earlier, they give people a voice. So for example, maybe this is where like new online social media like Facebook, it's not really that new. But Facebook, I don't know if any of you recall, there was a huge scandal with Facebook. They took down, people were posting themselves, nursing their babies. Facebook took down all of the pictures of moms nursing. Now, if you've seen maybe some of your friends on Facebook at the beach or at a party, there's a lot more cleavage showing than a mom nursing her baby. So there's a huge issue with Facebook. A lot of people joined Facebook to become very vocal online. Communities were formed virtually. Communities also connected people to go to nurses, so they showed up at Facebook headquarters nursing their babies. It's doing a lot for getting people to group together, whether it's virtually or live. And other thing that I just learned, Edward told me this a few months ago when my talk was announced, women who are not able to physiologically breastfeed but are committed to giving their baby breast milk organize via a Facebook group and recruit, they organize themselves. So women who were having milk to donate and women who needed milk connected via Facebook and then recruited truck drivers to drive their milk across country. And this was all because of Facebook and so they're tweeting information, they're Facebooking. I think a lot of positive is happening. It's connecting people, but also negative, you see the remarks. Like I deliberately don't go onto certain Facebook pages because I can't handle the comments and I don't want to start a Facebook, but I don't go there. So but people are heated. And again, not everybody has a background in lactation, communication, or research, so I can understand some of the layperson's comments, but so I definitely think social media will be more beneficial than harmful.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So what are your thoughts on the sexualization related to, for example, breast cancer research? Like, I'm thinking of this one campaign, Save the Tatas.
Yes.
So,
And
I've heard.
So right, so you're kind of saying, okay, well, breasts are sexualized. Let's use this in favor of supporting breast cancer research, which is advantageous. And I'm not saying like don't sexualize breasts. I don't know if we can win that battle. I'm just saying, okay, if you're going to view them as sexual objects, also be okay with them as feeding objects, as objects to keep our species alive, essentially. Right, because that's what they did before formula was created. And I didn't get into the history of the Nestle campaign and so forth. That's like for another chapter. But right, so if they're sexualized, it doesn't thrill me as a feminist researcher, but let's also show them and normalize them as being for feeding and for health. There's also a lot, and this is what campaign activists, I was working with the president of the Massachusetts Breastfeeding Coalition, the author of one of the articles, Dr. Bartik, about really promoting the breast cancer piece with breastfeeding and really kind of trying to play that up. There's also a new stat that came out that if baby girls are breastfed, they're less likely to develop breast cancer as women. So we're really trying to push the breast cancer information and pair that with the importance of breastfeeding as well. While understanding that every woman has a choice, we just want them to make an educated choice.
I actually have a tangential question, and I'll just advertise my class, Women, Race, and Gender in the Media, for those who might be interested, or gender race. There seems to be an obsession in the last few years with what I call the baby bump. I don't call it that, the media calls it that. This idea that women are pregnant, that they're showing it, and of course I date it back to Demi Moore appearing painted on the cover of Vanity Fair, which actually about 20 years ago now or more. But it seems like in the last 8 or 10 years, you watch Entertainment News, which I watch for research purposes. And, it's like, there's the baby watch, the bump watch, they're always looking, and also the maternity clothes are so different, used to hide the fact that you were pregnant.
Now they kind of sexualize.
Now they're sexualized, they're clingy, and I'm just wondering if you've thought about any kind of connection there or how you see.
Well, there's definitely so much more attention.
Yeah.
As soon as they suspect someone like 2 days pregnant, they zone it. Every shot is on the person's stomach. They could just be bloated from eating a pizza and having a beer. So it's really.
The pizza
it is an obsession. It really is an obsession, and I think because of that obsession, I do see questions asked, especially like People Magazine interviews, like, oh, how's breastfeeding going? Like, I think Snooki, recalling the last time I read people about someone having a baby with Snooki, and she's talking about, oh, well, we had some challenges and this and that. So I think, yes, that obsession with the bump has led to questions about how you're feeding the baby, or has led to celebrities opening up about that aspect of parenthood.
But I guess I also wonder why it's okay for the media to be so looking at women's bellies and looking at women's, exposed pregnant bellies, but not the actual net result of that, which is the baby and then the baby having to be fed. Like, why is that okay? Because it's everywhere.
I don't think people they can still kind of sexualize that image, but they can't sexualize it when a baby is nursing.
Yes.
Maybe they feel like, oh my gosh, like how can I even go there? So I think that hinders the schema, really. How they frame that image psychologically.
On a similar note, I'm just curious, in your surveys, what were people's rationales for being uncomfortable with seeing breastfeeding? Did they give reasons for why they were uncomfortable?
The second study I did, so with the women, all the women, it was like I had a comfort with public breastfeeding study, and majority of the women were, I think the mean, it was a 1 through 7, I think the mean was like a 4.5. So it wasn't like as high as I expected from a population of women who breastfed, because the majority of the population of my survey breastfed. I think people are just still uncomfortable doing it in public and seeing it in public. When I did the survey with the college students, the mean was quite low. Because, and I remember going in, I was teaching gender and communication at the time at UConn, and I went into my class and I'm like, I just got my results, I can't believe college students are so uncomfortable with seeing a woman nurse in public, and my students went up. They were just so vocal, so negative towards it. Several female students said they were very uncomfortable. One female student said she saw a woman nursing at the mall and thought she was going to get squirted with milk, so she ran by her. I mean, just ridiculous comments, but I was thinking, then I kind of paused and I was like, well, an 18 and 19-year-old, 20-year-old college student, male or female, are they really thinking about the reproductive or the biological purpose of breasts? That's probably not what they're thinking of. So, therefore, I'm comfortable seeing a breast being used to feed a baby in public. But people are so, uncomfortable. I get emails daily. Another woman asked to leave Starbucks. Another woman asked to get off the plane. Malls. I was, when I was at Policy and Advocacy Chair in Connecticut, a woman who was nursing an infant, like literally a 2-week-old baby. A security guard came up to her. She was in the food court. He's like, please go to the other end of the mall. There's a nursing room. And the other end of the mall was like a mile away. She would have to pack up the stroller, her bags, the new baby, and she wasn't revealing everything. I mean, there are a lot more, like the kids making out in the food court or, portraying more sexual behavior than. So she contacted the coalition, and there was a big nursing stage and so forth, and people are just, generally speaking, I don't know how comfortable. One of the articles I cited was by the CDC, a researcher at the CDC, and he conducted public opinion data and asking people their comfort with public breastfeeding. And he dissected the data by region, and he found that people in the Pacific Northwest were most comfortable with public breastfeeding, second to the Northeast. The lowest rates of comfort with public breastfeeding were the South, and some southern states have very harsh laws for women who are nursing in public. And they also have the lowest rates of breastfeeding in the country, some of the southern states. So, interesting.
Mm-hmm. I was just wondering was there ever a time in the United States where women breastfed publicly and it was not looked down upon?
It's interesting because I've received from people who know I studied this. I received like campaigns from the 20s and the 30s that actually show women nursing and nurse your baby, and they're kind of, in the text is kind of scary, like nurse your baby or they'll die, and they list 10 reasons like why, and they actually show, and then there's a history of white nurses in our country as well.
Right.
So a lot of research, well, I shouldn't say, I've seen a lot of qualitative research and some like non-scholarly research recently about African American women and their role of breastfeeding and so forth. So it's really fascinating. The 70s perhaps?
Yeah, I think this, because, I mean, certainly in the 50s, it was completely verboten. And people were convinced that formula was better than breast milk, and that was all due to marketing. But I think the 70s was a very different time, you know, because that was like, you know, free love and free everything. And then, of course, the 80s is the decade of backlash against so many elements of the 70s. So perhaps it's not surprising that in the 80s you get this that backlash is so strong that we're still sort of
recovering. We are, and the rates of breastfeeding dropped really harshly in the 80s. Now they're getting better. I have a link, which I don't know if I can show you, but I can change that. But so the rates as of the data collected in 2009, the rates of initial breastfeeding are 75% in this country. But by 3 months, they're like at 30%. By 6 months, exclusively breastfed, they're much lower. But they're better than past decade. And that's, you know, a lot of what the Surgeon General called for action included in the hospital criteria if they want to become baby friendly. And the federal legislation for working women too.
Right.
Sorry.
I was actually just going to mention that. I mean, it seems interesting that you're mentioning how quickly these rates drop off. At the same time, you know, we're one of the only industrialized countries that doesn't provide paid maternity leave.
Exactly.
Or paternity leave.
Right.
Or, I mean, anything along those lines. So at the same time, you know, people are having to go back to work, and that's creating a factor where they may not be able to be in the environment they're in, or may not have childcare available at their work. It seems like a kind of tying back into your final slides,
Right.
that, you know, really the support aspect is very much lacking.
Exactly, and that's the problem. Like our country, what's our paid maternity leave? Isn't it paid? Zero. Did you recently tell me about Germany?
Germany's
3 years paid? Okay. Germany has a very high rate of breastfeeding. A very high rate of breastfeeding and a long length of breastfeeding as other European countries and Scandinavian countries. Not only do they give maternity leave, they give paternity leave as well. So yeah, our country has a long way to go with giving the mothers an opportunity to do that. Since they're not giving paid maternity leave, there have been a lot of laws in the past couple of years, the past 2 or 3 years, that have given women the ability to at least take breaks without getting fired to go pump breast milk. A lot of places have lactation rooms where they have rooms where women can go pump in private. If they have on-site daycare, that makes it much easier. Companies are starting to realize the benefits for them. Their employees will be satisfied, they'll miss less work, they'll be helping their children, less insurance costs. So they're starting to realize the economic benefits of providing these lactation rooms and these lactation programs. And under federal law, if you're a company with more than 50 employees, you have to provide breaks, unpaid breaks, that you can't fire one for taking breaks. There's still a long way to go, obviously. And yes, it's a huge barrier. That's another like booby trap.
Okay, time for one last question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think one problem is that Americans seem to be very sensitized to everything that's going on. So Americans grew up in the 40s, 50s, 50s, kind of like you said, with very strict rules. So in turn, generations that follow are going to be within those parameters. So if we were told that that was taboo back then, it's kind of what we're thinking now. Yeah. But in the beginning of your presentation, like you said, European countries, which are much more sexual, they don't have these problems. So there was a big push as you're kind of gotten into to have breastfeeding, then it should kind of follow. That will become used to it. So I think maybe the problem is breasts. That is, I mean, you can see African tribes on National Geographic, they show those breasts on TV. I've seen those in grade school, but you can't see, anyone else's breasts on TV. So I think the problem is that breasts themselves are so covered up that when they see them in a different light, they just don't know what to do.
Except the Sports Illustrated cover.
Yeah,
right, but definitely in other European countries, it's also like they have the thought of healthy sexuality. in our country, you know, which is founded by puritanical values. It's hard to teach it or think of it as healthy sexuality to let me contribute to some of your thinking. All right, well, thank you so much.